Have you ever wondered why bad things happen to good people? Not just good people, but the very best. The ones who live with kindness, humility, and fear of God. Well, let me tell you a story. An old story, a true one. The story of Job. Now, Job didn't live in Jerusalem. He wasn't part of the story of Moses or David or even the prophets. No, he lived in a land called Uz, a region far from the heart of Israel, remote but not forgotten. The Bible tells us this about Job right from the start. He was blameless and upright, one who feared God and shunned evil. Blameless, not perfect, but honest, a man of integrity. When he spoke, people listened. When he gave, the poor were fed. And when he prayed, heaven leaned in. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he loved them deeply. He offered sacrifices for them regularly, just in case they had sinned in their hearts without even realizing it. That's the kind of father he was, not just present, but prayerful. And yes, he was wealthy, very wealthy. Thousands of sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys, a household so large that people called him the greatest of all the men of the East. But it wasn't the riches that made him great. It was his faith, steady, quiet, unshaken. While the world chased power and pride, Job chased righteousness. While others forgot God when things went well, Job remembered him every single day. He didn't serve God because life was easy. He served God because it was right. And that is where our story begins. Because just when everything seemed perfect, just when Job was living the life that anyone would admire, a conversation happened in heaven, and Job's world was about to turn upside down. Now, what if I told you that while Job was living faithfully on earth, something was stirring in the heavenly realms? The book of Job pulls back the curtain and lets us glimpse a moment not many ever see. One day, the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and among them came Satan. Job 1, verses 6. Yes, the adversary, the one who prowls like a lion, also has access to stand before God. And the Lord asked him, "Where have you come from?" And Satan answered, "From roaming through the earth, going back and forth in it." Job 1, verse 7. Just imagine that. The enemy of truth walking the earth, watching, scheming. And then the Lord, he does something powerful. He points to Job, not as a target, but as an example. "Have you considered my servant Job?" he asks. "There is no one like him on earth, blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." Job 1, verse 8. But Satan isn't impressed. He leans in with a challenge. "Does Job fear God for nothing?" he says. "Have you not put a hedge around him, around his household and everything he has?" Job 1, verses 9 and 10. You see what he's saying? He only serves you because you've blessed him. Take that away, and he'll curse you to your face. A bold accusation, not just against Job, but against the very nature of faith. So God allows the test. He says, "Very well, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself, do not lay a finger. Job 1 verse 12. And with that, the stage is set. Satan leaves, not to whisper lies, but to unleash disaster. Now pause for a moment, because what we just saw wasn't a punishment. It was a test, a divine moment where heaven said, "Let's see what true faith really looks like when everything else is stripped away." And Job, he has no idea what's coming, but we do. So don't go anywhere, friend. The storm's about to break. Stop and think with me for a moment. How faithful, how righteous must a man be for Satan himself to say, "I want that one"? Out of all the people walking the earth, it was Job who caught the attention of both heaven and hell. That alone should tell you something. Satan didn't choose a rebel. He didn't ask to test a lukewarm soul. He asked to test the best. Job was so blameless, so upright, that God himself said, "There is no one like him." And Satan said, "Then let me try him." Imagine being that faithful, so unwavering that your life becomes the battleground of a cosmic question. Can someone love God for who he is, not just for what he gives? And now, as Satan moves forward with permission to strip Job of everything, the test begins. But before we dive into the tragedies that follow, ask yourself something. If your name came up in heaven, how would it be spoken of? Would you be seen as someone who clings to God in the light and in the dark? That's what this story is really about. Not just pain, not just loss, but what remains when everything else is taken away. If that's a question worth asking, then this is a story worth hearing all the way to the end. If this stirred something in your heart, tap that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel, because every day we share a new story. Stories that dig deep into Scripture. Stories that awaken the soul. And friend, you don't want to miss what happens next. And then it began. In one single day, the walls of Job's world collapsed. A messenger came running, breathless, shaking. "Your oxen and donkeys were stolen, your servants killed." Before that man could finish, another ran up. "Fire from heaven, it burned up the sheep, and more servants." Another. "The Chaldeans attacked, camels gone, more lives lost." And then, the final blow. A fourth man came. His eyes said it all. "There was a great wind, a storm. It struck the house where your sons and daughters were feasting. And now, they're gone." Job 1:13 through 19. All of them in a single day. Everything Job held dear was taken. No time to breathe, no time to cry, no time to ask why. And yet, Job tore his robe, shaved his head, fell to the ground, and worshipped. He said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job 1:21. Can you imagine that kind of heart? But the storm didn't stop there. Satan returned, and this time with permission to strike Job's body. Boils from the soles of his feet to the top of his head, pain unimaginable. He sat in ashes, scraping himself with broken pottery. Job 2:7 through 8. Even his wife, once his partner in faith, looked at him with despair and said, "Curse God and die." But Job replied, "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Job 2, 10. Through all of it, the loss, the grief, the illness, the silence, Job did not sin with his lips. He did not accuse God. Friend, when life shakes us to the core, this is the kind of faith that shines through the ashes. And Job, sitting there in dust and pain, was still holding on to something eternal: hope. Now imagine this, friend. You're sitting in ashes, skin covered in sores, your wealth gone, your children buried, your body aching, and your heart broken. And then your friends arrive. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar. They see you from afar and don't even recognize your face. They tear their robes, throw dust in the air, and sit with you in silence for 7 days. 7 days. No words, just grief. Job 2:12 and 13. But then the silence ends, and it turns sharp. Eliphaz speaks first. He says, "Think now, who that was innocent ever perished?" Job 4:7. In other words, surely you must have done something wrong, Job. That's the tune they all sing. One by one, his friends start picking apart his life, digging for some hidden sin to explain the suffering. God doesn't punish the righteous, they say. If you were pure, this wouldn't be happening. Imagine hearing that when your heart is already shattered. And Job, he doesn't lash out. He doesn't curse God. He doesn't curse them. He speaks honestly, with sorrow, yes, but not with hate. He says, "You are miserable comforters, all of you." Job 16:2. And who could blame him? Even his wife earlier had told him to curse God and die, but Job didn't. No matter how hard the questions got, no matter how cruel the assumptions became, he held on to the belief that his Redeemer lives, held on to the idea that somehow, somewhere, justice would rise again. Job 19:25. Now that is a rare kind of faith, the kind that doesn't bend when the world is breaking around you, the kind that says, "I may not understand the pain, but I still know the one who holds me through it." Now let me ask you something, friend. What would you do if everything you loved was gone? Not in theory, not as a thought experiment, but for real. No warning, no reason. One day you're whole, and the next you're in pieces. Would you still trust God? Would you still say, like Job did, "The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord"? Job chapter 1, verse 21. It's easy to praise when skies are blue, but what about when the storm settles over your soul? When your prayers feel unanswered, when your body aches, when people whisper that you must have done something wrong? Would your faith still stand? Job didn't have all the answers. He questioned, he cried, he even cursed the day he was born. Job chapter 3, verse 1. But he never cursed his God. He didn't walk away. He clung to hope, even when there was nothing left to hope in. Now that kind of faith, it isn't cheap. It's forged in fire. So take a breath and really ask yourself, if you were in Job's place, would you hold on? If this story stirred something in your heart, don't just let it fade. Tap that like button, subscribe to the channel, and come back tomorrow, because every single day we bring you powerful Bible stories, just like this one, stories that test the heart and remind us what faith really means. After all the silence, after the ash-covered days of sorrow, after the questions, the tears, and the accusations, God finally answered. But he didn't whisper. He spoke from a whirlwind. A voice like thunder rolled from the storm, shaking the very soul of the man who had lost it all. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Have you commanded the morning? Can you loose the cords of Orion? Job chapter 38, verses 4, verse 12, and 31. God didn't explain why Job suffered. He didn't lay out reasons. Instead, he reminded Job of who he was, the creator, the sustainer, the one who sees the end from the beginning. And suddenly, Job understood. Not everything needed an answer. Some things needed trust. With trembling hands and humbled heart, Job responded, I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. Job chapter 42, verse 3. And in that moment of surrender, everything began to change. God restored Job, not just what he lost, but twice as much. Job chapter 42, verse 10. More livestock, more wealth, more joy. He was blessed with 7 sons and 3 daughters, and the Bible says these daughters were the most beautiful in all the land. Job chapter 42, verse 13 through 15. Job lived 140 more years, long enough to see his children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. Job chapter 42, verse 16. And he died, old and full of days, not just with blessings, but with a deeper knowledge of God than ever before. Because sometimes, friend, God doesn't answer with explanations. He answers with his presence. And in the end, that's more than enough. Now, take a moment and breathe. We've walked through ashes and storms, through sorrow and silence, and seen a man remain faithful through it all. But what does the story of Job mean for us here, now? See, Job didn't follow God because his life was easy. He followed God because he knew him. And that's the kind of faith the world needs today. A faith that doesn't break when things fall apart. A faith that doesn't vanish when the answers don't come. A faith that holds on even when heaven feels silent. Most of us won't face what Job did, but we will face seasons of pain, of questions, of loss. And in those moments, we must decide, will we curse the darkness, or will we trust the one who made the stars? The story of Job reminds us, God sees, God knows, God restores. Not always when we expect, not always how we imagine, but always in His perfect time. So let me ask you, dear friend, do you want that kind of faith? The kind that stands firm even in the fire? Then start right here. Open your heart. Talk to God like Job did. Wrestle, weep, worship, and never forget. The same God who walked with Job through loss and brought him back into light walks with you too. If this story stirred something in your soul, tap that like button. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Come back tomorrow. We tell new Bible stories every single day. Stories full of hope. Stories full of truth. Stories that just might change your life. We'll see you in the next one.